Hey everybody, this is Eric Bond, the founder of beatthegmat.com, and back with you today with another part of our Write Like an Expert series. So today we actually have Kristen Darrow joining us. Kristen is actually an MBA admissions expert with Veritas Prep, and we're going to be talking about Wharton today. Again, this is the fifth part of our 9-part Write Like an Expert series where we're going to be discussing and dissecting each essay in the top MBA admissions school or MBA programs. And so a little bit about Kristen. Kristen is a Wharton grad. She's actually an insider. So she graduated in 2007 with a focus on finance and strategic management. And Kristen was also a part of the admissions committee and was VP of admissions for the Wharton Veterans Club. So she has a lot of perspective, not only as an MBA expert about the schools as in general, but also has sort of that insider perspective of what it's like to be a student and working in the admission and seeing, I guess, how admissions work from the inside. And prior to Wharton, Kristen has a very interesting background. Actually, she was a captain in the Air Force, and after Wharton, she is now serving in a strategic operations role at eBay. So Kristen is joining us today from an outside location. She's normally from California, but she's currently in a hotel in Utah, but has taken the time to speak with us for the next hour. So Kristen, welcome to this Beat the GMAT series.
Good morning or good afternoon to everyone out there. Thanks for joining us today.
Great. So we're going to let Kristen kick off this presentation. We're going to be back in just a moment to switch to her slides. So stay with us and we'll be back in just a couple seconds. Okay, folks, we're back. We're ready to kick off the presentation. So Kristen, it's all yours.
All right. Excuse me. Well, thank you very much, Eric. And like I said, welcome to everyone for joining us this morning or this afternoon. Let's get going. So let's talk about Wharton and specifically the essays for this year for the applications. So there are the required questions. So we'll start with the required question this year, and then there are three. You need to answer 3 of 4 questions. We'll get into those in a second. So the first question is, what are your professional objectives? This is 300 words, which is a lot shorter than this particular question really has been in the past. And when I say this particular question, it does only ask about your professional objectives, but this question is also really asking more. So it's a typical career goals question that you'll see on just about every MBA application. But because of the length, you're going to need to economize on your words and really take more of a big picture approach. So the absolute necessary things here are to answer the question around what are your short-term and long-term goals. A good answer is also going to say why you need an MBA in order to achieve those short-term and long-term goals. And then, as space allows, I think that it would be appropriate to begin to address why Wharton specifically to get that MBA that you need. A little more detail here around short-term, long-term goals. A lot of folks start off with saying, well, especially if you're a career changer, which is, absolutely a great thing to go to business school in order to make that career transition. So they say, well, things like that they want to change from one industry into another, and then it's very vague after that. And so, okay, well, that's only sort of a part of the question. So when we think about what are the short-term goals that you have, what we're thinking about here are things like what is the role that you're looking for, and what is the function of that role, what is the industry, and what are some example companies that you would like to work for, and then thinking about is that actually an appropriate level. Clearly, you don't want to say that you want to graduate from business school and become a director of something, because nobody at a non-startup right out of business school is a director, basically. So at least not out of a non-executive MBA program. So it's like, what are our appropriate short-term goals? It makes sense here to also explain how you came to that short-term goal. So if you are, for example, a mechanical engineer and you want to go to business school because you wanted to get into real estate investing, you know, you absolutely can do that. But how in the world did you get to that interest level, you know? So if you tell me you want to join, you know, Tish's Spot, I've been saying that correctly, then that's great, but how? So maybe the answer is, you know, on this, in addition to your engineering, on the side, you have been involved in a family business with residential real estate investing, and it's really interesting to you. Now you want to do it full time, but in the commercial space. So all of a sudden, within the space of one or two sentences, you completely connected the dots for AdCom around why you want to do what you want to do. And the next thing around long-term goals, absolutely okay to be more general here, because it's long-term. You know, nobody has that type of vision. When we think about long-term, what we're really thinking about here is more of like the 8, 10, 15-year long-term goal, not necessarily the 25-year goal. So something where, and like I said, this can be a little more general. So this is the thing, like say you wanted to join a particular company within a specific industry, in a specific function, maybe a CFO track, so you want to go into corporate finance within the energy industry. I'm really pulling it. So as a note here, as we go through the presentation, I'm just pulling examples as we come. So if they don't completely make sense, feel free to ask for clarifying questions later. But so like I said, so if you say you want to, join corporate finance within the energy industry, it's totally okay to say as a long-term goal, and then I want to become a CFO of a mid-tier of a smaller company, or over the long term, I want to be in the top 10% of management. You don't necessarily need to say, I want to be the CEO, because, quite frankly, there are many, many people who have very successful careers who aren't necessarily a CEO, but they are, in senior management. Okay, and then the last thing here is, so you've explained how you came to the short-term goal, why it makes sense for you, what your long-term goal is. And the other big piece in this essay is, well, why do you need to get an MBA? And what we're talking about here is there are specific skill sets that you need in order to go to business school, right? And that I would focus on that word need. Lots and lots of people want to go to business school, but schools only let in people who need to be there, right? So using our engineer who's making a big transition. So, clearly this is somebody who has a lot of technical skills, but maybe this person doesn't understand marketing or finance, for example. So if you want to get into real estate finance, then you're probably going to need to know, how to calculate a cap rate. And so those are types of things that you can actually say, these are the things I need to learn. And it can be general around, like, I want to learn strategy or I want to learn marketing, but the more specific you can be, that shows the more insight that you have into your long-term plans. And finally, as you can say, Wharton is the best place for me to learn these skill sets because of, and then come up with actual answers that apply to you and your situation, that will demonstrate to the AdCom that you've done your homework and you understand what you're asking to where you're asking to go to school, and that also helps AdCom see you there. All right, so now let's move on to the optional question, not optional, but the questions that you get to choose. Excuse me for just a second. Pardon me. So this year we have some really interesting questions, and the one I'm showing on the screen boils down to very long-winded in the beginning, but it comes to, if you were able to create a Wharton course on any topic, what would it be? So here we're given two examples of courses that were created. Both of these, I want to point out, are international in perspective, and both of these have some type of social impact. I think that's interesting that this is what the AdCom has chosen to highlight, but I don't think that it is necessary if you're answering this question in order to choose a class that would be around a social impact choose one that's around an international focus. So not necessarily just interesting. I think that what AdCom's doing there is sort of showing to part of who the school is to applicants as well. So this is the type of experiences that we want our students to have. So here, this is really, like I said, an interesting new question. There's some different ways to go about answering it. You can use it to reinforce your career goals. So if you found that maybe in the first essay you didn't have the space to really get to the heart of your questions, then maybe this is a good space to say, talk about a course that would help you achieve your career goal. Maybe taking the completely different tack, it's something that is a secondary interest or a personal passion, not necessarily related to your professional goals, but it would allow you to demonstrate other facets of your personality and your background to AdCom, and again, therefore demonstrating how you would add to the student body. And then finally, you can talk about how you want to supplement the current course offerings with some new business ideas, some new idea around business, a new concept, something that's just coming out. Wharton, is the first business school, and it's always focused on innovation and being cutting-edge research and learning opportunities. So this is a really neat idea to show that you're also embracing that viewpoint as well. Okay, here you want to also demonstrate your fit with the school by kind of indirectly answering like why Wharton. A great answer here is probably going to address things like, well, what's the teaching method of your course? Is it purely a case study? Is it a mix of case study and lectures? Are there projects? Is there some type of experiential learning, like a demonstration or a simulation or something like that? Wharton is also, I think, really interesting in that Wharton really embraces a range of teaching methods as opposed to other schools that are maybe more streamlined. So, here you want to think about why it is, why this class would be a particularly good fit at Wharton. Again, like I said earlier, it doesn't necessarily need to be related to a social impact. And then you want to avoid what I would call some obvious pitfalls. So if you choose to answer this question, go to the curriculum list. Make sure it's not something that's already being taught. And the last thing is you want to beware of overreaching the question. And what I mean here is, getting too broad. So if you design a class that is going to involve, 20 professors from all different schools of UPenn, or it's going to involve like a world trip or just something that's not doable, well, then you discredit your whole your essay. So and you show that maybe you don't have the best judgment in choosing that. So here you want to think about, okay, what actually could be taught within the construct of a university, within the construct of a 12-week class. Okay, so then after this, another option is to reflect on a time when you turned down an opportunity. What was the thought process behind your decision, and would you make the same decision again today? So this is a great opportunity to show that self-awareness and introspection into your thought process. The first word in this question is reflect. So then, it's around letting the AdCom know how you think as you're talking about, your decision-making process and your priorities, what I call the why of the situation. Why did you make the decision that you did? You want to avoid turning this question into a failure essay or similarity to if you answer the failure essay, which we'll get to. So if you choose an example of a decision that you wouldn't change, you want to make sure that you wouldn't change it because if you had changed it, it would have been a failure or something like that. So again, it's just making sure that you you present different facets of who you are as you're answering this question. The other side of that is that you could show humility by saying, well, if you had to do it over again, you would do something differently. And that's a different trait or value that you demonstrate by revealing that. But ultimately, I have here, you want to show your judgment and your maturity by sharing really what you've learned, how you've grown as a person because of this experience. And what I mean by how you've grown, I'm looking for here demonstration of skills and values that you've developed that will be useful within the school environment. So and not collectively or exclusively to this essay, but in general. If you're talking about some lesson you've learned and how you're a better person because of this lesson, well, we really want to see lessons that are appropriate to be shared in a business environment, or not to be shared, but appropriate to. So, if you've learned, for example, how to work better in a group dynamic, well, that says, well, then so you've had a lesson where you've become a better teammate because of that. Great. Wharton's learning teams will value your ability to work with other people and work through some challenging situations, in that environment. And then, of course, that's a skill for in business later on. Moving on to the next question, the failure question, which I referenced before. Describe a failure that you have experienced. What role did you play, and what did you learn about yourself? There's a theme here. How did this experience help to create your definition of failure? Lots of schools ask some type of failure question. This version from Wharton this year around how you define failure is also, I think that's an interesting addition to the question around trying to get to know applicants better as people. So another opportunity to show introspection, self-awareness, and maturity. A lot of folks choose a failure that wasn't really a failure. That whole, describe your weaknesses in a job interview where you actually talk about your strengths. Just as it does in an interview, choosing that tactic here will ring hollow. I mean, the number one pitfall in these questions, the failure question, is always if the writer has chosen a topic that's actually a failure. So that's the first thing you need to make sure you get right. So you want to use a structure here to write this essay, which I think will work well to talk about what was the situation, and summarizing that quickly. And then you want to focus on what the failure was, then showing what the analysis and the action was, and then what was the outcome. You want to talk about what your response was to this failure, what you learned, and your personal growth. So here again, it's what did you learn, what skills that you have, and that you are a better person and a better leader, will be a better business leader because of this experience. Last thing is you want to show what I call emotional resilience. If you can talk about an instance after the failure where you're in a similar situation where you applied what you learned and then you avoided that similar failure happening again. So it's hey, I actually did learn this lesson, and I'm demonstrating that again. With this and this essay and the previous essay and the one that I'll talk about in just a second, these are also opportunities to, if you have the space, because 600 words is a fairly generous allotment, you can absolutely tie in some things around why you want to go to Wharton, around, and how that applies to your lesson. Perhaps the lesson that you've chosen to demonstrate that you've learned through failure is one that will come in handy while you're a business student at Wharton, and then you can say why. So just an idea there. And then lastly, discuss a time when you have navigated a challenging experience in either a personal or professional relationship. So this is about, regardless of the what of the situation, like what the challenge was or what the relationship was that you really want to talk here about, the what I call the willingness to consider other people's perspective. So, is that you want to focus on and share why it was a challenging experience, and talk about, show how you're showing empathy to the other person or persons within that are involved. And can you figure out a solution on your own? Are you resourceful? If you have a challenging relationship, are you able to work through it with the people involved and then continue to work with them? And here, like I said before, this is how you manage relationships is definitely a key to leadership. And then, also a clue about what I call the inevitable difficult situations within learning teams at Wharton. And I say difficult situations, I mean that, every learning team has a point at which you've been working on a group project for hours and you're tired and people maybe don't necessarily agree, and you have to circle back within your group of 5 or 6 people and say, well, okay, how do we come to a consensus decision on this? How do we work together? How do we continue to get along? And how do we all put together a project that is a great output, that is actually a true representation of our capabilities as students, and really honor all of those commitments that you want to get to. So again here, if you can talk about how this experience and what you learned from it is going to be useful to you at Wharton, even better if you can weave that in as well. Okay, so I think that brings us to the end of our slideshow. So I'm going to go back to the pretty starting screen. And then, Eric, I think that we're ready to get into questions.
That's great. Thank you so much. Big thanks to Kristen Darrow for that walkthrough of each of the questions for this year's Wharton MBA application. So what's going to happen next is we're going to bring Kristen back in just a moment. So we're going to take a brief pause. And once we get her back on the video, we'll be taking your questions. So now's the time to write in your questions. We have Kristen, who is an MBA alum from Wharton, as well as an expert on Wharton. So it's the perfect opportunity to get your questions answered. We'll be back in just 1 second. All right, folks, we're back. For those of you who are just joining us, we're speaking with Kristen Darrow. Kristen is an MBA admissions expert with Veritas Prep. And we have just walked through, or Kristen just walked us through each of the MBA admissions essays for this year's Wharton application. And now for the remaining hour, we're going to be talking, or Kristen will be taking your questions about Wharton or the application, or any questions about experience as a student at Wharton. So we have a question to kick it off from BDAC 101 on AOL. He asks, how much of the career goals essay should we dedicate to talking about Wharton?
That's a great question. So I would say, you want to answer the question, unfortunately. I don't have a formulaic answer around, 10% to this and 20% to that. You want to answer the question. Take the cue from what the question says, which is, what are your professional objectives? And make sure that question is really answered along all the dimensions before you get into Wharton. But, I think the why Wharton piece is probably appropriate for, a few sentences. Mm-hmm. It doesn't need to be any major part of the essay.
Right. And I think, one trap just one comment to just piggyback BDAC is don't don't spend any time just flattering Wharton. I hear this is a very, very common trap where you just find yourself just praising the program and it doesn't reveal anything about yourself. Wharton already knows it's awesome. So frankly, it doesn't need you to remind it.
Well, and to that point, Eric, I would say as you make your point, not just about your goals, but about your fit with the school, with any school, ask yourself as you're critiquing your writing, could anybody else say this? Because if every applicant can say the same thing, like, I want to go to Wharton because it's a great business school. Well, yes, that's like Eric said, like, we know that. Focus on making statements that are applicable and pertain only to you. Right.
Right. No, I love that point. In fact, Kristen, we heard a very interesting piece of advice yesterday in a different session where it was almost like a suggestion about playing ad libs. If you can switch out the name of the school to a paragraph that you're writing about the program and it still makes sense, then you're in big trouble. It really has to be tailored specifically to the school. Okay.
I absolutely agree.
Great. Well, some more questions coming in, and this is one. This is one that I'm dying to ask. So, is Wharton just a finance school?
Wharton is a fabulous finance school, but we are so much more. So, if you look at for example, the latest U.S. News and World Report around best business schools, I think there are 8 to 10 specialty categories, and Wharton is in the top 5 for, let's just say, I think there are 10. I think for 8 or 9 of the 10, we're in the top 5. So that's across marketing, that's across strategy, and a whole range, entrepreneurship, whole range of different specialties. And so, no, Wharton is not just a finance school. For example, our marketing program is hands down outstanding. What makes Wharton's marketing program, for example, different than maybe another school is that we have really put a lot of analytical rigor throughout the whole curriculum. So that means that you don't just talk about marketing, but you understand what is what's the revenue impact or the cost to maybe putting together a marketing campaign. And I think that a lot of my fellow alumni would agree with me in saying that type of analytical rigor that's present throughout the curriculum, regardless of what you specialize in, is one of the aspects that is not just differentiating to Wharton, but also, and more importantly, a differentiator for alumni as you go forward in your career.
That's great. So a definitive no would have also worked, but it's not just a finance school. I think Kristen has really elaborated that we need to break that myth. And unfortunately, it's too common, even still within our community, that people sort of typecast Wharton as just one kind of program. But clearly, it's much more. So a question coming in from Facebook from Cindy. Cindy is asking, is it okay to show a certain level of vulnerability, such as how much I don't know about business?
So again, these are all, it's all relevant to the specific applicant. So I'm going to give unfortunately I can't get too much into specifics, but let's just do what we can here. So generally speaking, it's okay to show that you're vulnerable in that you still have a lot to learn. That's the reason you're applying to business school. What's not okay is to say, I don't know anything about business, so let me in and I'll learn it while I'm there. Mm-hmm. It's okay not to know it, but what you do need to know is what you want to know, right? So it's like, and then it's knowing what you're going to do with that knowledge. So, for example, you know that you need to know how to value a company, and you need to learn finance, okay? But even if you don't know finance, you at least know where your skill set deficiency is. And the reason for that is that all business schools, they move really quickly. Mm-hmm. You'd be shocked at how soon summer internship recruiting starts almost as soon as you're on campus. if you don't have a focus around what your career goals are and how you're going to get there and what you need to learn in order to make all of that happen, you'll get left behind and you get lost. And AdCom knows that, and that's one of the reasons why you really need to lay all this out.
Yeah, and there's also the perspective of, another way to view the glasses half full is, what unique things can you bring? If you don't have much of a business background, what are some of the unique skills you have in perhaps a non-business realm that you can bring to the Wharton class, enrich the class discussions and so forth. And, just one reminder to the community, I don't think any business school wants just a single cookie cutter, business savvy set of people.
Prior to business school, she wasn't a dancer, but she worked in ballet, in a fine arts capacity, in the fine arts industry. So she has a really interesting perspective that she brought to school, and that's definitely interesting. But at the same time, she knew that she wanted to go into marketing, and that was why she was there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great example. Okay, another question coming in from Qualtron from AOL. Does the essay detailing opportunities turned down have to be about a professional example?
No, the question says personal or professional. You want to just, caution there, keep it appropriate. If you had a personal relationship with a, romantic significant other, really want to think about how that's appropriate and additive to your business school application. So, be cautious there.
So we're talking to Kristen Darrow, MBA expert with Veritas Prep, and she is answering your questions about Wharton. So at this time, feel free to shoot them over through this landing page, and we'll try to get them answered live. Another question coming in from Raman on Facebook. Is there any need to give a comparison of why Wharton versus other schools?
I don't think so. You want to talk about why you want to go to Wharton, there's not a lot of space, right? You don't have an abundance of words. I've rarely found an application or worked with a client who, it comes in under or significantly under the word requirement. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to waste any of that space talking about another school.
Right.
And plus it's really about it's that positive viewpoint around what you're bringing to Wharton.
That's right. So, I do have a question, though, just specifically about your background, because, you have a military background, and there are a number of people who are in our community, actually, that have similar backgrounds and are seeking, business school admissions. And one of the most common questions I have is, I want to go to business school, and I've had a career in the military, but I want to transition into the private sector business. I don't have any. There's so many questions there, but I just want to sort of get your perspective first as to what was your thinking as you were looking at Wharton as a way to transition from that military life into civilian business life.
Yeah, well, Eric, I think that one of the things that applicants. And not just military applicants, but anybody who is not in business, really someone who is a non-traditional applicant. So this could be a Peace Corps volunteer, somebody who's working in another nonprofit, an engineer, for example. Mm-hmm. And what you want to think about is, well, if you want to make that transition. So again, business school is the perfect experience to make a really significant career shift. And so you want to think about, well, why? So why you want to make a career shift? You probably thought about that as part of your decision making and your planning. Beyond that, you want to think about, well, what industries appeal to you? One of the, I think, challenges that non-traditional applicants have to overcome is that development of your career goals. We can talk very eloquently about our experiences working with people and teams and showing leadership, all of those things that go into a business school application, because those experiences transcend a business working environment to really any working environment. Mm-hmm. It's about why you need to go to business school in order to make that transition. It comes down to, again, explaining explaining the transition, so mm-hmm. drawing on themes in your background or interests that you can demonstrate, and then saying why you want to have a career, and then what skill sets and techniques and learning do you need to have, experiences maybe via a summer internship that you need to have in order to achieve that career goal. So again, when you're changing careers, there are a wealth of usually skills that you need to learn in classrooms, experiences that you need to have, and for a lot of people, especially if you want to get into something that's entrepreneurial, you need a network of other business people, and Wharton has 80,000 plus alumni worldwide. That's a pretty incredible network that you have to draw on, and definitely a great resource.
Just elaborating a little bit more too on what you mentioned about career goals. So in your presentation, you actually said that the appropriate time frame for considering a long-term career goal, I believe you said it was like on the order of 8 to 15 years post MBA. I mean, I've heard many different answers actually for how far you should look, I suppose, into the future. Do you have a sense that Wharton has a different time frame versus other schools, or is there some sort of gold standard that you set?
Let's look at the question itself. What are your professional objectives? So, I mean, if you are one of these rare people who has a path planned out for where you need to be every step along the way for mm-hmm. the next 30 years, great. Now, the downfall to that is that, you need to show that you have some flexibility because, the best laid plans, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think that there is, a gold standard. Frankly, I'm not aware of, maybe other schools and what their preferences are. So, again, it's really just about what makes sense. Like, what is an appropriate long-term goal based on your short-term goal? And what is the appropriate time frame in which you would transition in more, or sort of approach that long-term goal? And that's what you want to say. And it's also okay to say, over the long term, I'd like to, become whatever. I mean, if your long-term goal is something that's going to take 15 years or more, I would say anything more than 15 years would sort of give me a little bit of qualm. You would need to sort of have something in between that and whatever the long-term goal is. But, that's probably the one area where, as long as it's applicable, you have some leeway.
So that's pretty interesting. I completely personally buy the notion that it's really hard to plan even 10 years out. So much can happen. I mean, when I think about my life 10 years ago, I can't imagine I'm actually in front of this camera talking to you. Do you think that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Do you think actually that there's a risk of losing credibility then if you go even like beyond 15 years? Because as you said, there has to be some flexibility built into people's lives. And I think a lot of our community actually has asked this question of, does this seem insincere almost to map out a 20-year plan?
Again, as long as it is general enough so that, you can say, I would like to do this. So let's say if your long-term goal is to use the example I used earlier, you want to be in the top 10% of the leadership of a company, of a Fortune 500 company. Okay, that's great. If you say I want to be the CEO of General Mills, because you want to go into consumer goods, well, that's great, but you may not get to be the CEO of General Mills, for example. Maybe you say, I want to be the top 10 of management of a consumer products company, of a major consumer products company. Okay, so that's where it's specific. It's applicable to your earlier goal, but it's not so narrow that it then becomes unrealistic, or, as our other folks have asked, does it become insincere? It's not. It's broad enough that it's doable.
We're talking to Kristen Darrow here for those of you who have just joined us, and she's an MBA expert with Veritas Prep and taking your questions. I see another question here, and this is one that I've been curious about, which is about Wharton's location. So can you tell us, well, there's two questions to this. So first is, like, what do you think of Wharton's location? What do you think of Philadelphia? And then another one, a sort of follow-up question to that is, does my network stop on the East Coast, or can I go abroad? Can I go across the United States, outside of, I guess, the Wharton physical vicinity? So why don't you start with, what did you think of the location?
So I love Philadelphia. My husband and I had a fabulous time when we lived there, and it's really a great city. So Wharton is physically located in University City, which is on the western side of downtown Philadelphia. A lot of Wharton students live downtown in the, what broadly called the Rittenhouse Square district. It's a really nice area with lots of the typical amenities that go in, it come with living in any big city. There's plenty to do and see outside of school, and very easy to take public transportation to get to campus. And I didn't have a car for the 2 years that I was there, but I had a great relationship with my bike and the bus routes, and there's even a subway. So the location, like I said, the location's great. I liked the fact that it was close to New York. But for me, I spent a summer in New York, and I love New York. But from the job recruiting aspect of, if you're going into, for example, finance, it's great to be so close. You can just, go into drop by and have coffee with somebody in Midtown, But at the same time, you're sort of then expected to put in that face time. Whereas if you're in Philadelphia, a little bit more insulated from that, which is nice. Another thing, Philadelphia is a smaller city. It's walkable. You can actually walk, bounded, not entirely, but bounded on the east side by a river, and so you can walk from the east side, to Wharton. Take you a while. It's like 40 blocks, but doable. So I think it's a great city. You can't come to Philadelphia and expect it to be New York. You have to appreciate that. But again, I'm a big Philly fan. So yeah, go Phil.
Yeah.
I picked up an affinity for the Phillies baseball team while I lived there, in fact.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, in terms of the network is global. Wharton is global. The alumni network is therefore global. So I live in the San Francisco area. There is a tremendous number of alumni there. And really, in any, think about any area where there are a collection of, there's industry, and whereas you're going to find MBAs, you're going to find Wharton MBAs. Right? So I wouldn't consider, it's not insulated to the East Coast by any means. I definitely have friends from my class that are in all four corners of the U.S. and, in between, in addition to in many countries abroad.
And just just a question about the friends who are now abroad. So, can you speak a little bit more to how career placement works for people who are interested in international careers, maybe getting placed in Europe, Asia, anywhere else outside of the United States? Were there certain programs around that, or did you see? What kind of impressions did you have?
Yeah. Wharton is a global name. So companies that are interested in hiring Wharton graduates, definitely come to Wharton to hire. So, like I said, I know that I have classmates who are American who pursued opportunities to work abroad after school, and so it wasn't just necessarily because they were going back to their home country. I would not speak at length about career services. I would encourage anyone who's really interested in that, get in touch with the career services offices at Wharton. They're fantastic, and I think they're very helpful, and they can tell you about what specific services they have for international placement. But I'm quite confident that there are extensive services.
A question coming in from Facebook with regard to opportunities as a student. So the question is, what kind of real-time entrepreneurship opportunities exist for students at Wharton? Are there sort of student incubators or competitions, and just more about, I think, the entrepreneurial side?
Yeah. Well, probably the flagship entrepreneurial event at Wharton is the business plan competition, which is really fantastic and really interesting. So it's open to the university as a whole. So it's interesting, first of all, there, in that Wharton students will have the opportunity to work with, say, engineers from the engineering school or doctors in medical school, so that you can, or to be doctors, but so that you can really think about a complete range of business plans, and then pull in people who are experts already in that, in more of the technical expertise, if it's not resident within within folks you already know. And then I guess that the business plan competition starts at the beginning, and they have speakers come in, entrepreneurs who talk about how to put together a plan and how to structure a pitch to a potential investor, how to put together a marketing plan, for example. So it's great in that it's not only just a one-time competition, it's an incredible learning experience for anyone who has serious entrepreneurial aspirations, because you learn so much being part of the competition, whether you win or not. Now, to the winners, there's some serious prize money. I can't recall off the top of my head how much it is, but it's definitely in the thousands of dollars that the winners finally receive in order to get businesses started.
That's great. And so, you mentioned that this competition is, across university, and one thing that I've been always curious about was the relationship between the Wharton MBA students and the Wharton undergraduates, and I guess anyone who is in the umbrella of the Wharton program. Did you find that across programs there was what was that interaction like, if any?
Well, so the one thing to keep in mind is that Wharton is a big program. So there are 800 students in each class. So
Wow.
there's 1,600 MBA students at any given time. And then, yes, there are absolutely a lot of Wharton undergrads. I think there are a few classes which the Wharton honors undergrads can take with the MBA students. There's some interaction there. I think that, more so than with undergrads, Wharton students have opportunities to interact with graduate students in other programs in the university. So, there's GAPS, I can't remember the acronym, but it's something about, the Graduate Students Association. And that's, so that's like the nursing school and the medical school and the law school, engineering graduate students, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there are plenty of social events. I have a friend who's married to a woman he met through one of those events, and they were both, grad students at Penn. He was in Wharton and she was in another program.
Very nice. So I think we have time for just 2 more questions here.
Great.
One more. So this question comes from Avnish on Twitter. The question is, how about the location? It's a location question. So do you have any thoughts about the West Coast, San Francisco location? Is that something only available to executive MBAs? And I think that he's talking about the Wharton West.
Yes, Wharton West is an executive program location at this point.
I see. Okay. So that answers your question. You're just going to have to wait a couple more years and then apply to the Wharton West program, and then you're good to go.
Go silly.
Yeah, no, so just philosophically, I personally, this is kind of embarrassing because, as the founder of Beat the GMAT, you think I know this, but I'm actually not that familiar with executive MBA programs. Do you have any perspective about what the difference is between and value is between the full-time experience as well as the executive experience?
Sure. So when people are thinking about going back to business school for a full-time program, these are, the general point in their career trajectory is that they're generally 3 to 5 or more years out of undergrad. They have a few years of working experience, and the reason they're going to business school is either to advance their current career, and maybe they have plans to go back into that career, but what they learned in business school was necessary pretty much to advance, or they're career changers. And again, what they need to learn in business school is necessary to advance. For them, it makes sense, and it's really a lot about that. It's about the age range. When executive programs are really tailored to people who are further along in their careers, and or people where maybe they have personal or professional obligations, so that maybe they're not able to take 2 years off of from working full time, and so they need to go part time. So this is there are more seasoned business professionals who have reached a point in their careers where they really want to advance with their current company, and they have a good career there, but there are just some skills that they don't have yet, and so the company will sponsor them to go back to school on full time and gain those skills. So with an exec program, not only do you see just the age of the students is older, but you'll also just see that you'll have a higher preponderance of students who are sponsored by their companies, and or they have intentions of going back to working for that company after they finish the program. Right.
I'm with Avnish. I'm actually with Kristen. You should just go to Philly. It's gonna be way more fun spending the 2 years there. Okay, actually, I do want to take two more because I like these last two questions. One question is from Ping on MSN. So what does Wharton want that's different from other schools in terms of applications? Kind of a general question.
Well, so this is interesting. It's one of the things that applicants always want to know, and I wanted to know myself, is how does one school compare to another? But the interesting thing is that's actually impossible for any alumni to really answer, because I've only been to one business school. I cannot tell you what it's like to go to any others. So I think that the best way for applicants to understand that question is to talk to alums and read the materials that are available online, go visit schools if you can. A lot of schools have local receptions, nationwide, even globally. So go to those if there's one in your area. And from that, you can get a sense from talking to the people of who the different schools are, and then form your own comparison. So with that in mind, I would hesitate to say that, Wharton has anything specific to versus other schools. I would just go back to what is Wharton asking for. And Wharton, if I was describing my classmates as the typical Wharton student, I would say Wharton students are, very thoughtful, considerate, collaborative people who will go out of their way to help others, even if they don't necessarily know them. They are absolutely, obviously, incredibly intelligent, driven, interesting people, but again, not in my experience, like very nice people, and also very interesting people. I definitely had the experience that a friend of mine told me about that she had as well. That after the first sort of month or so of sitting in the classroom and getting to know some of my classmates, thinking, how the heck did I get in? Because these people are amazing, and they're from all over the country, all over the world. They've done such really interesting things. And if I had to be, sort of stuck in an airport with any one of my Wharton classmates, I feel pretty comfortable that we'd have plenty to talk about for, however long we were snowed or thunderstormed in.
That's the classic test. In fact, when I was doing recruiting back in the day, I remember using the airplane test as well. As if we hired this person on our team and we were snowed in for 10 hours, would I feel comfortable talking to this person for 10 hours? It's a nice little proxy there. Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Nothing. I don't have anything else.
Okay. Okay. So final question from Lavinia on Facebook. This is a good way to end. So how does personal life events like becoming a mother interfere or help shape your career goals, essay? This is a very sort of unique situation of, after getting my MBA, I do want to become a mother potentially or father and take time off to raise family. Do you think that's something that could be woven into your career goal story?
I mean, I think that it's very common for most people want to have a family at some point. And because of the, typical age range of full-time MBA students, it's very often, really, really close to, after completing school. So I think that that's where you want to think about where you include it in your career goals, I'd say, is it some situation that's unique to you that makes a difference to how admissions would see you? Because, frankly, many women want to have children after they graduate, but it doesn't. It's just from the professional side of things. It's something that happens. And you take some time off and then you go back to work. So it's not necessarily intrinsically part of your career unless you maybe if you want to start a business focused on some niche of a new mom. Well, then maybe the fact that you've recently had a baby and that experience helped you identify an opening, in the marketplace. Well, then that's appropriate because it's relevant to what your career goals are.
Right.
So again, you just want to think about, is it relevant and is it something that applies only to you? If so, then yes, you should probably include it. Otherwise, would probably steer clear of that.
Kristen Darrow is an MBA admissions expert with Veritas Prep, and she has just been with us for the last hour to walk us through each essay in this year's Wharton MBA application, as well as take your questions live. So, Kristen, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you, Eric, and thanks to everyone out there who joined us. I hope it was helpful, and I believe, look forward to hearing from many of you, and good luck on your essays.
Great, fantastic. And so just a couple of things before we wrap up. Just want to remind folks that we have a few more of these events lined up for next week and the following week. Next week is actually Booth as well as Haas. So come back for that and check out those sessions. And if you have any questions that Kristen was not able to address during this session, you have two options for getting some answers. One is to go to veritasprep.com. So as many of you know, Veritas Prep is one of the elite MBA admissions consulting firms. And they have a great staff who would be ready to and willing to answer your questions if you just reach out to them. So give them a call, shoot them an email. You'll find very great responsiveness with Veritas. A second option as well is the Beat the GMAT forums also hosts an Ask Veritas Prep discussion forum where MBA admissions experts are waiting to answer your questions. So plenty of options for you in case we missed your questions. And that being said, thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you next week for the next sessions. All the best.